Hi, friends. Awkward intro. Welcome into Up to the Second College Football, episode 11. We do it for the Saturdays, and we are presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors, and they want to remind you to have fun out there with Academy Sports and Outdoors. All right, we got a packed show. Chuck Oliver, he knows everything about college football. He is so good. He's going to break down all the big storylines out there. Got a great show there in the Atlanta area, does wonderful work, got a syndicated program as well. We're going to get reports also from the A&M Ole Miss game. How about the Baylor-Oklahoma game, Michigan-Penn State, and Notre Dame, Virginia? It's Up to the Second College Football. All right, guys, let's get into it with our big guest of the week, Chuck Oliver, King CFB on Twitter. We know all the great work he does. He knows the SEC and all of college football. You can hear him on the Chuck Oliver Show on 680 The Fan in Atlanta. He's syndicated in the area as well. All right, Chuck, Ole Miss, A&M, Penn State, Michigan, Georgia, Tennessee, so many different games to get into. Let me ask you this about Georgia. Is there a team in college football that matches up well with them, in your opinion?
You can match up pretty well with Georgia's offense, I believe, especially if Stetson Bennett is the starting quarterback. And I have to keep reminding myself to be critical of him, to be suspicious of his next performance because he had no stars and is from a junior college. But if he is the starter, there still is at least the chance for a stinker. You saw, they blow out Florida, but you saw some of the interceptions, especially the one down to the goal line. And that's not really a JT Daniels throw. So you can match up with their offense, I believe. I don't believe anybody matches up with Georgia's defense, including Alabama. Alabama, if we're fast forwarding 3 weeks to the SEC championship game, if it is the Tide, they got issues on their offensive line, man. You start at left tackle. We love Evan Neal. As you get further down the line towards right tackle, literally every spot, it gets further and further away from what the Bama standard is. And that is no way to go into a game against this year's Georgia team. So I don't think anybody matches up, even Alabama.
So do you think Alabama's going to make it to the college football playoffs?
I don't this year. They're going to pick up their second loss in Atlanta, and the committee – despite what they say each week and each year, this system is not set up currently for a G5 program to ever make it. It's not supposed to happen. The only scenario possible is if all the programs that normally the committee would want to include, and I'm just talking even 1 years because they got the record, and so we would put Washington in at 12-1, for instance. The only way a G5 program can make the playoffs in the current setup is if all of those other programs eliminate themselves. And when you have not been looking very Bama for most of this season and you pick up a second loss, plus, what are you going to do? You're going to put them at the 4 seed and let them play Georgia again the very next week? Or you're going to put a two-loss team as 2 or 3? So if they pick up the second loss, they're out in Atlanta, and then the playoff committee may have a bone to throw to Cincinnati at that point.
What is the latest with the quarterback situation there with Georgia?
Well, JT Daniels, the way it was put to me about a month ago, and this is a quote, was, Chuck, I think this is going to be every Saturday of the rest of the season. We're going to see how JT feels when he gets out of bed. And my understanding now is he is healthy and able to go. Kirby, I think, looks around, and I understand his logical mathematics equation. We're the number 1 team in America, plus we're undefeated, plus he's been the starter, plus he's a great leader, plus all the teammates love him. It equals, why would we make a change at starting quarterback? I understand the math equation, but I still know what I know. JT Daniels is better. And the only question I have about Stetson Bennett, and I said you can match up with their offense, is can Stetson – they can beat everybody on the regular season schedule, sure. Can Stetson win the 3 games in a row that he needs to? And I think you need better arm talent for that. That's what's up with the quarterback right now is we're number 1. It's undefeated, and we're going to beat Georgia Tech and Charleston Southern regardless. So let's keep going until we're certain it's time to make a move. Now, the one caveat I'll throw you, I think that if there's a game and Stetson gets in a little bit of trouble, I think that's all it is. It's a little bit of trouble, and that leash is short. I think he'll be yanked pretty quickly in a game where Kirby decides, all right, JT is available and Stetson is a little off.
Chuck, let's talk about this A&M Ole Miss game. You got offense on one side, and you got a defense, maybe not as salty all year as Georgia, but pretty close to the way they've been playing recently in A&M's. Just talk a little bit about how you see this game playing out.
It's just supposed to be, DeMarvin Leal, isn't it? It's supposed to be just the names we know, and it's not. It's 3, 4, 5 other guys, including the nickelback, who's the
Antonio Johnson,
sophomore nickelback?
You got Antonio
Johnson, yeah. who's emerged to maybe the number one player on the entire defense. I mean, we knew the studs coming in, but that defense, Elko has had a tremendous season on that side of the football, and they needed it early. Now, even with the performance Saturday against Auburn, where no touchdowns, just a bunch of field goals and stalled drives, they had windows. And I swear, if you didn't watch the game, you're not going to believe me. They had windows where they just started ripping off yardage, and then they get the red zone, they bogged down. Calzada, he had some windows where he looked like, all right, I'm going to rip it a second before the guy makes his break, and it's going to be there. Just not enough of those. That offense has a lot of potential. And see, there's a big difference between A&M, in my mind, and Alabama over these final 3 weeks. I think A&M still has some getting better to do. I think Bryce Young and that offense right now, that's kind of what it is. Calzada, I've seen him the last 3 or 4 weeks since the announcement came that Haynes King not coming back. Confidence, the rest of the team, et cetera. He has been a better quarterback. Maybe it's just happenstance. That's when it occurred. But I like the blue sky and the continued growth for this offense. And Lord knows you play Ole Miss. I mean, the defense, there's going to be an opportunity there. Later on, LSU, I mean, honestly, their defense, there should be an opportunity. You should be able to kind of stretch your legs a little bit more in November, maybe.
Chuck, how about this chaos, if you will, happening in Gainesville with Dan Mullen, the perception of Dan Mullen, the kind of coaching he's done this year, the way that team has played?
Dan has been his own worst enemy at times. I said before the Georgia game that they're going to lose, and that's almost certainly what's going to happen. But I don't think the story will be the loss. I think the story is going to quickly become Dan's reaction to the loss. And that's exactly what happened. I'm guessing over the last 7 days, somebody got to him for some media training, finally, after being a head coach for a decade and a half. And it has been a much kinder, gentler Dan Mullen. It's the charm offensive a little bit right now. None of that matters in the SEC. And here's the thing. It's still a line of scrimmage league. You can't turn the ball over. You can't give extra possessions. Penalties I don't normally care about, but, I mean, especially in the Kentucky game, they've just had some awful, awful runs with penalties. It's a really undisciplined team, and the talent isn't where it's supposed to be. So I understand him moving on from Grantham and Hevesy. It's probably a little too late. In fact, it is too late for him to have made those moves. But going forward, if it is a brand new Dan Mullen that is going to rededicate to a staff that recruits, he always understands recruiting, folks. I swear, and they're always recruiting, but it's who you have on your staff that's out there on the road getting it done. So I think it's been a wake-up call, and even a veteran coach like Dan Mullen, it's possible for him to kind of have a light go on.
All right, so let's play about Alabama again, but from a different perspective. Here in College Station, the hope is that Auburn can beat them. But I'm asking you, do you think Arkansas, the way they're starting to run the ball again, could they potentially beat Alabama?
When you got a quarterback like Jefferson, absolutely you can. You always have a shot there because the offense is going to show up, and they have the best receiver, I think, in college football in Treylon Burks. And see, all of this was true, 5 weeks ago against Georgia, and Treylon Burks, I think, had like 3 catches for 15 yards or 16 yards maybe. And they never got the ground game going, and Jefferson wasn't dual threat. He wasn't single threat. I mean, it's the Georgia defense. A little different against Alabama. Again, there have been windows. And when I say windows, I mean like the opening drive against Ole Miss and the fourth quarter. All right, that was a window where the opponent was doing what it wanted to. Is the second half against Florida, can 2 quarters be called a window of issues on defense? Alabama's had some issues on defense at times this year, and Arkansas's got the kind of offense where they can take advantage of it to a degree.
Chuck, we appreciate it, my friend. Thanks so much, and hope to be on your show soon and hope to get you back here soon as well.
Anytime. I appreciate the invite, man.
Need a new grill? Academy Sports and Outdoors is the destination for your outdoor cooking needs. With our free in-store assembly and pre-assembled grills and smokers, buy online at academy.com and pick up in-store. So keep those grilling plans at Academy Sports and Outdoors.
All right, guys, it's time for our big game showdown. It's going to be popping there in Oxford as A&M travels to take on Ole Miss, a couple of really highly ranked teams, number 11 A&M, number 12 Ole Miss. And from an A&M perspective, my buddy Olin Buchanan, which you can hear him on the show with me on TexAgs in the mornings. And, of course, from Ole Miss, we'll talk to Neal McCready from rebelgrove.com. Neal, how are you, sir?
Gentlemen, I'm well. Thank you for having me.
OB, hello, sir.
Hello, glad to be here.
So awkward when we say hi to each other. We see each other every day. All right, so we move on to Neal. Let's update us on the most recent health reports on Matt Corral and really the wide receiver core and the offensive line.
Well, you have to remember first, David, that this is Lane Kiffin, and the standard answer to any question regarding injuries is we hope they play. I could ask him about players who have acknowledged on social media that they're out for the season, about their health, and he would say we hope that they play. And then he would follow up with, of course, we hope that everyone plays. So that's the Lane Kiffin answer. And so it's a little bit of guesswork. It's a little bit of leaning into sourcing and that kind of thing. I think Matt's situation is pretty obvious. He hurt the ankle against Tennessee. He does this deal where each week he kind of gets off of it, puts a boot on, all that stuff, gets into the game. They shoot him up. He feels better until he aggravates it again, and then you rinse and repeat. And we've done that for a few weeks now, and give him a ton of credit because he hasn't missed a moment. He's not played as well as he played pre-injury, but he still played awfully well, and he's given them a real opportunity to win some games. And the bigger problem has been his supporting cast has been impacted as dramatically as it has been, especially up front. Everyone talks about the wide receivers, and I'll get to them in a minute, but up front has been the big problem. Ben Brown, their starting guard who will play in the NFL, he's out for the year, having surgery, tore his bicep, having surgery to get that fixed so that he'll be ready to go when the combine rolls around, or at least you hope so for his sake. Orlando Armana, the Utah transfer who started the season at center, has had to play some guard. He's had to play some center. Some of that is because of injury. Some of that is because of a hand injury that we believe he has. Jordan Rhodes, the South Carolina transfer who played good bit of guard when Brown first went down. He's not played much lately. We believe that to be injury related. Wesley Melton, a freshman out of Texas, the Houston area that came in and played a lot against Tennessee, a lot against LSU. He did not play last week. We believe that to be injury related. They've just had up front, they've been just really banged up, and out wide, their three best wide receivers have pretty much missed most of the season from a consistency standpoint. Braylon Sanders, who's their deep threat, got hurt early in the year. He's tried to play a little bit. He did play more against Liberty than he's played in the past few weeks, so I think there's probably some optimism there. Jonathan Mingo broke his foot against Arkansas, I think early in the season. The boot's off, and the rumor is from his family that he's going to try to play on Saturday. Whether he can play effectively on Saturday or not remains to be seen. And then Dontario Drummond appeared to pull a hamstring against Auburn. He's not played since then. The rumor is that he's going to try to give it a go against Texas A&M. I have no idea how healthy he is or isn't. But also Chase Rogers, their starting tight end, he's out. So offensively, they've been really banged up. It's been pretty remarkable. Caleb Warren's another guy, offensive guard, that has missed most of the last few games. He's tried to play a little bit, hasn't been able to. I think they just kind of sat him last week to say, hey, let's try to get you well, as opposed to re-aggravating this. But offensively, they've been a mess.
Olin, we just heard Neal talk about how tough Matt Corral has been this year. Let's talk about Zach Calzada, a guy that we get to see each week, and separate his shoulder, loses a knee in the Alabama game, still comes out and has his Willis Reed moment. How tough has he been? Well,
it sounds to me that these may not both be two of the necessarily best passing quarterbacks, maybe Corral, but definitely the toughest quarterbacks in the SEC, because you hear about everything Matt Corral's been through, and then you look at what Zach Calzada's been through physically and mentally. Mentally, beginning of the year, trying to get comfortable as taking over as a starting quarterback, and then all the criticism that then came with that, and then you add the physical issues with the leg getting hurt against Alabama, and he goes into the tent, then he comes back out, and not only does he play well, but he runs for a key first down on the game-winning drive, which you didn't see that coming. And then last week, like you said, he dislocates his shoulder, and he's out there on the field where they're trying to pop it back into place, and you're thinking, okay, he's going to be out for at the least the rest of the game, and he misses 2 plays, and actually comes out and makes some pretty good throws. I guess it must have been his left shoulder that was dislocated, but those are 2 tough guys, and 2 guys that I'm sure their teams respond to that toughness and makes them want to play for them even more. But if those quarterbacks weren't as tough and dogged as they are, both of these teams may be really in trouble.
Neal, let's talk about Kiffin and the way he uses his words. And he talked about A&M being the most talented team that they've probably played this year. Some people around here think those are just words, very nice words. But does Lane really believe that A&M is the most talented team?
Yeah, I think so. And you got to keep in mind, Lane Kiffin's an offensive guy, so he's looking at that defense primarily. I mean, I know he's looked at the Texas A&M offense, but I suspect that what's got his wheels spinning is looking at their defense, and that defensive front. You guys see it every week. It's awfully impressive. Leal's a stud. I mean, just a monster. And the other guys are really good too. And I think when you juxtapose that against the offensive line issues that I've talked about, you can see where Lane probably is obsessed a little bit right now about what's happening up front with his offense against that defense. Look, is Texas A&M as top to bottom as talented as Alabama? I don't know. A&M beat them. Bryce Young's awfully good. Alabama's got loads of talent. But I think Lane looks at this matchup, and he knows that they depend on tempo, and that if that defense stops them, things could get kind of squirrely, if you will. And I know he's concerned about where their offense has been really since the Tennessee game and its inability to do all of the things that you would like to do. If you look back at the beginning of the year when they played Louisville, when they played Arkansas, when they played those kinds of teams, and they had all their weapons at their disposal, they were really explosive. They could beat you in so many different ways. They were very difficult to defend, and they were able to really utilize that tempo. And ever since they've started losing people, that's been less and less the case. They've been really inefficient with the tempo. When you bring new guys in, you get illegal procedures and false starts, and guys get misaligned, and it takes another minute to get guys lined up. And they've kind of been woeful in the red zone, really, since some of the injuries have piled up. And so I think Lane's mind, when you hear him talk about Texas A&M, his mind is on his offense going up against the defense that, listen, outside of Georgia, who I think has the best defense in the country, there's not another defense in the league that stacks up against A&M's.
OB, is there any place where A&M is vulnerable on that defense?
Sure. I mean, they've left the middle of the field open too many times. They don't give up a lot of big runs, but they do tend to give up a run or two a game. Remember Missouri, Tyler Batty has a long run. I think there were some long runs, in Colorado. The Alabama guy, Robinson, he ran really well against A&M. So they don't give up a lot of consistent plays, but they can be subject to giving up some big plays. And Ole Miss has, first of all, they got the running backs. Jerrion Ely, 69 yards for a touchdown against A&M 2 years ago. In the running game, I don't know that they have a guy that you can count on to just carry it 20 times for 100 yards because he's averaging 5 yards a carry and never having more than a 10, 11-yard game. But they got guys that can go 70 yards in a blink of an eye. And so you got to be concerned about that. And then if the guys from Ole Miss are back, A&M's secondary has been kind of up and down at times. Like I said, the middle of the defensive backfield's been open at times. And even if they don't show up, some of the guys like Sanders, who can definitely be a big play threat. But even if he's not there at 100%, or Drummond, or some of the other guys, Mingo, Dennis Jackson had a big game last week. I go against Liberty, but that just shows he has the ability to have a big game. John Reese Plumlee, is it Reese or Rice? Rice Plumlee is a guy who's a really good athlete that if you sleep on, he can make some plays. So, and I'm sure Lane Kiffin's looking out as he develops his game plan, and he's seeing that A&M has a true freshman cornerback. And he's probably thinking, I'm going to really test him every opportunity I have. So I'll say this, A&M had better take advantage or capitalize on what appears to be an advantage with their pass rush against the Ole Miss pass protection. Because if they don't, Matt Corral is certainly a guy that can hurt you, and no matter who his receivers are.
Neal, what concerns Ole Miss about the A&M offense? Is it that running game?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and Ole Miss has gotten better as the season's gone on. Like, I think a lot of us kind of felt that they would. It was the preseason question I would always get, because last year Ole Miss was like 1-7 117 or 120. I don't remember. It's really down at the bottom of team defense, total defense. And everybody, are they going to be better on defense? Like, yeah, they're going to be better. That's not a question. It's how much better. And they're kind of middle of the pack right now, which is kind of what I thought they would be, which is year over year a pretty good accomplishment. And they've gotten better against the run over the course of the season. LSU had no success running against them a week after LSU just rushed all over Florida. I think what concerns you about Texas A&M, though, is their ability, is that offensive line there has gelled, their ability to run the football, control the clock, eat possession, wear down a defense. It sort of goes hand in hand with what we were talking about earlier with the tempo, right? If you run tempo, and Ole Miss will, because it's just what they do, it's their weapon. If you run tempo and it works, awesome. If you run tempo and it doesn't work, it's kind of a double whammy because your defense is right back on the field. And against that Texas A&M offense, the way that they like to go with those two backs who are exceptional, it can wear you down over the course of a game, and that has to bother them. And then Calzada's gotten better. I think they'd love to go back and play the Zach Calzada who played against Colorado and Arkansas. They'd probably prefer that he show up this week. They've gotten better this year, getting to the quarterback. They didn't get to the quarterback at all last year. This year they have gotten to the quarterback. Sam Williams has had a special season on the edge for Ole Miss. I think that's a big part of their plan is if you can control the running game a little bit and get A&M just a little bit behind the chains, you've got to get to Calzada. You got to hit him. You got to make him uncomfortable. You got to have him thinking about pass rush. You can't let him kind of get into his game because from what I've seen from him, when he kind of gets going, he like a lot of young guys, his confidence builds. I'm sure they would love to shake his confidence a little bit on the road and get him sort of thinking a little bit and get them rattled some.
All right, Olin, let's end with this. Zach Calzada on the road, game day experience there. He's had road games, but nothing like what he's going to experience here. He had the game in Dallas versus Arkansas. He had the game in Denver against Colorado, and he had the game in Missouri. So what about this atmosphere for the Aggies and for Zach Calzada in the way he attacks?
Well, I think that Calzada just has to make the plays that are there. He doesn't have to win the game for him. He has to, quote, be the game manager. And if he can do that and avoid the mistakes, I think A&M will be okay. But that's an easier thing to say than it is to do. I've been to Oxford for A&M games, I think 4 times, and they've all been just nail biters. They've all come down to the wire sometimes, and that's with guys that were first round draft choices, or like Johnny Manziel. Johnny Manziel with Mike Evans had to win 2 games at the very end. Kyle Allen, the NFL quarterback, lost there. So did A&M, Kellen Mond's in the NFL. They lose their last time they're in Oxford if Buddy Johnson doesn't pick up a fumble and take it for a touchdown. So every time A&M has gone to Oxford, no matter what the situation was, it's been a high-stress, grind it out, look for that one big play here and there, and maybe get a little bit lucky too. And I don't think that you can go into this game, no matter how well you're playing, and just assume it's going to be any different.
Neal,
those Manziel games, not to interrupt the flow, those Manziel games in Oxford were 2 of the most incredible performances I have ever seen. Because if A&M has a mortal quarterback in either one of those 2 games, just a good quarterback, Ole Miss wins those games. And they simply could not stop Manziel. They literally, if I recall correctly, had A&M pinned on the 4th and something inside their own 10 late in the game. And Manziel somehow avoided pass rush, somehow moved around and threw a dart to Mike Evans on the Ole Miss sideline. Sinquez Golson, who was 5'9", could not have guarded the play any better. He was literally in perfect pass coverage position. There was nothing in the film. All you can do is, it sucks. And the play was perfect, and A&M went on to win that game. Manziel, I didn't mean to interrupt the flow.
That's fine.
That dude was incredible in those games. Just unbelievable.
And in both of those
performances, like a Cam Newton performance. There's just a handful that stick out in your mind when you do this long enough. And those 2 did just unbelievable.
And in both of those games, A&M had to get a real late, like in the last 30 seconds, interception to nail that game down in 2012. And in 2013, they had to go on a last drive for a Josh Lambo field goal on the last play of the game. So nothing comes easy for A&M and Oxford.
Well, I'll say this, guys. Anytime we can talk about Johnny Manziel, I'm down for it. So we can extend any interview anytime to talk about Johnny football. Gentlemen, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
At Academy Sports and Outdoors, bikes for the whole family are just a click away. Buy online at academy.com with our free in-store assembly. Your next set of wheels, plus helmets, pads, and water bottles will be waiting for you at our in-store pickup counter. Get to the fun faster with our in-store pickup and free assembly at Academy Sports and Outdoors.
All right, guys, let's continue with these storylines. Baylor trying to come back after last week's loss to TCU. They get a well-rested and undefeated Oklahoma team that I have a lot of questions about. Let's talk about it from a Baylor perspective with my buddy Paul Catalina from SECond365.com. Paul, how you doing, friend?
Doing great, buddy. Great to see you.
Great to see you, too, as well. So help me understand what happened last weekend. Is it just the Big 12 team starting to step up again?
Well, two things happened. The first thing that's the most important is Chandler Morris happened. That's what happened first. Chandler Morris happened. And Baylor had no answer for him. And really there was nothing they could do about that, because some guys, times, as you know, David, guys just have a day. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. It's just their day. They're on fire. You can have everything planned out. I think the second thing that happened is Baylor stepped into a huge trap. They beat Texas, which is a huge rival. And of course, with all the, SEC things going on, this one meant a little bit more to the fans, to the students, to everybody to beat Texas. Oklahoma is this week. TCU sandwiched right there in the middle. They fire their coach. It's chaos in Fort Worth, right? Well, not really. In fact, maybe firing Gary Patterson relieved some of the tension around the program. They were able to play with nothing to lose, where Baylor had everything to lose and was just really kind of lackadaisical and slow. If you watch that game, it wasn't like they played terrible. It wasn't like the Cowboys against the Broncos last week, but it was, what are you doing? Like, have you not seen this team give up gashes of yards on the ground and not be able to defend the deep ball? Why are you not doing that? And it just didn't make sense the whole time what was going on.
Paul, do you think, in your opinion, Oklahoma has faced an offense as good as Baylor's offense?
Texas is pretty good. I mean, when they're hitting on all cylinders, they get Bijan Robinson. He's probably the best player in the Big 12, and they faced him. But I don't think so to this point. I don't think they faced an offense that's as consistent as Baylor's is. When you talk about running the ball and really attacking you physically, it's not the best matchup for Oklahoma. But then again, that's why they play the games. We don't know who's really going to step up in those matchups. But I do think Baylor has an opportunity here to score some points on an Oklahoma defense that we don't know who they are week to week.
Let's talk a little bit about running the ball so well. That offense is really predicated on doing that. How are they running the ball so effectively?
Well, the first thing is that they got their offensive linemen in the weight room and out of the McDonald's in the offseason. And so they've gotten bigger and stronger and faster on the offensive line. The other thing is the wide zone offense is perfect for the personnel they have. Abram Smith coming back over to running back from linebacker, where he's been for the last couple of years, is perfect for the wide zone, that Shanahan offense, that, one cut and go offense. He doesn't waste any time. He has no wasted motion when he runs the ball. He puts his foot in the ground. He decides where he's going to go, and he goes there, and you're either in his way or you're not. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that attitude of they're going to keep on coming at you and coming at you and coming at you. And the threat of the play action keeps teams kind of confused, because they run so many really hard fakes off of it. It makes it really hard for teams to commit to one thing or the other. When Jeff Grimes was running it at BYU last year, obviously he had a better quarterback in Zach Wilson than Gary Bohannon. And I'm not knocking Gary Bohannon, but I mean, the dude's the second pick in the draft for a reason. Teams were just so nervous about committing to where they wanted to be. So, it makes them go, oh, are they going to do it? And then they're caught, whether they're trying to worry about the play action and Tyquan Thornton, or running the ball straight at you and Abram Smith, who's really difficult to stop.
Is that where you think Oklahoma's most vulnerable, the fact that Baylor can run?
Oh, yeah. I think that's what's going to And that's what Baylor's going to have to do. You want to limit Oklahoma's possessions because the more time that you give Caleb Williams to do something magical, the more time he can find something to do something magical. So they're going to have to limit them. They're going to have to grind the clock. In Oklahoma, you saw early in the Texas game, when you saw against Oklahoma State, when you run right at them, well, they haven't played Oklahoma State yet, but you run right at them. I mean, that's their vulnerability. That's what Kansas did. They kind of ran at them and, took them off, takes them back a little bit. They're not that strong in the front seven as they have been in the last couple of years. So I think Baylor has an advantage there if they really can commit to the run and if they can really hit some deep passes to make you concerned about it. That's what they didn't do from the second quarter on against TCU for a while, was hit the deep throws to make TCU back off a little bit and take some guys out of the box.
Paul, this is kind of a weird question because I feel like Baylor has always had these coaches that maybe could go elsewhere because of where they are. Now with the SEC changes, how hot of a name Matt Rule is the feeling that they can keep on to Matt?
Well, you mean Dave Aranda?
Sorry, Dave Aranda. Yeah, sorry. Dave Aranda,
yeah. We went through that a couple years ago.
That was a long time ago. I don't know where my brain was.
Yeah. No, I think that they will. And I don't think it's because Baylor's any kind of they're a bit more of a power player than they get credit for as far as money goes. I mean, you used to live here. You knew how it was before you came, but it's a little different now. Mac Rose has kind of changed things. He does well to keep his coaches. Finances are good. Facilities are about to build a new football facility to go along with the new basketball arena. So money's flowing through Baylor pretty good. I don't think that's really about that. I think Dave Aranda, when you get to know him, is a guy who is not a climber. Because when you think about, he could have had a head coaching job at any school that was open, smaller one, Wisconsin or LSU when he was the defensive coordinator, and he's waited for his spot. Baylor really fits his personality. He's a very deep thinker, a very philosophical guy, Yoda, the head coach kind of a thing. And I don't know if he's necessarily, even though he was at LSU as the defensive coordinator, I don't know if he really wants to jump into that. And you guys have talked about it, I'm sure, with the Jimbo rumors. Like, Jimbo's got it as good as any coach in America has it at A&M, aside from the fact that he hasn't won a national title yet. But everybody loves him. Everything's great. He can do whatever he wants. Does he really want to go to LSU and have to work for a living? More? Because, not to knock LSU, but right now they've got some stuff going on. Do you want that mess and chaos? Especially if you're like an emotionally centered person like Dave Aranda. I don't want that mess right now. Not that LSU is a bad job. Anyone would want it, but the personality fit for Dave Aranda to me is not really there at LSU right now.
Paul Catalina, my buddy, SECond365.com. Thanks so much, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Anytime, buddy.
All right, guys, Notre Dame is rolling again after struggling early on, but winning games, and obviously that setback. They're playing much better football, and to discuss it, we're joined by John Brice of footballscoop.com and Irish Sports Daily. John, how are you, sir?
I'm great. Good to be with you guys again and looking forward to the visit.
Yes, sir. So how big has the Bellyman been for Notre Dame, Kyron Williams, and his ability to put the ball on the ground and just go?
Yeah, and Kyron Williams has had that ability since his breakout season a year ago. The real key is that Notre Dame has finally established and settled on its offensive line, including perhaps most importantly of all, true freshman left tackle Joe Alt. He's a 6'8", 306, 310-pound guy who was originally a tight end as Notre Dame recruited him. His father played in the NFL for about 14 years, so he's got the bloodlines. But he's been key because he has stabilized that line, and he has tremendous upside.
So, and obviously Notre Dame's taking on Virginia here. Let's talk a little bit about Jack Cohen and how he's looked the last few weeks.
Jack has looked a lot better. He's looked a lot more comfortable. And because the offensive line has settled in, Jack Cohen has settled in better. And some quarterbacks want to take things slower, but Jack Cohen is big on tempo and is most comfortable when things are moving at a quick pace. And he's taking his drop and getting rid of the ball. So really Notre Dame's offensive surge, so to speak, has coincided with settling things on the offensive line and elevating tempo to a point that's much cleaner and better for Jack Cohen. I give Tommy Rees a lot of credit. It's a dramatic change from where Notre Dame was a year ago when it leaned almost entirely on its offensive line and fifth-year senior quarterback Ian Book.
John, looking back at the Navy game, slow start to the halves there was something that caught my attention, and I know they were asking Brian Kelly a little bit about that. What was the problem there? Was it just the way Navy was playing, or just Notre Dame came out flat?
Yeah, I think it was more Navy's defense than it was Notre Dame coming out flat. I haven't sensed this team really coming out flat in any ball game, except for maybe the Toledo game very early in the season. But otherwise, I think this is a team that comes ready to play each and every week. I just think for all of Navy's struggles this year, its defense has tended to keep the midshipmen in a lot of games, and it gave Notre Dame some problems. Notre Dame has battled some injuries to some key skill players. I think that was an issue, and they lost Avery Davis in that game for the remainder of the year. He's a senior captain from there in Texas who has played a bunch of key roles for Notre Dame. So that's a big loss. But Notre Dame got untracked, and honestly, it got untracked in a lot of ways because of what its defense did, bottling up Navy.
All right, long-winded question. For Notre Dame to get into the college football playoffs, they need some help. But I'm curious what they think about Cincinnati now with some time since that game. You know, there's a part of them that probably wants them to keep winning because it looks like the loss looks better. But at the same time, that could cost them a chance if other teams lose.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing Notre Dame probably wishes right now is that it had Cincinnati later on its schedule. It was completely disjointed at the time it played the Bearcats. It was a week after pulling away and really dominating the fourth quarter to post a big win against Wisconsin on a neutral site field in Chicago. And Notre Dame just wasn't very good, especially on the offensive line at the time that it played Cincinnati. But the Bearcats need to keep winning probably until the very end would be the best case scenario for Notre Dame. And Notre Dame has to take care of its own business. It's still an extreme long shot for the Irish to qualify for the playoffs. But I think that really behind Georgia, who's a consensus number one, I think chaos is the word that describes this college football season. And you've probably got 9 teams in some form or fashion that could claim a legitimate stake to those 2 through 4 playoff positions.
That is John Brice, footballscoop.com and irishsportsdaily.com. John, we appreciate it, sir.
Hey, I always love the visits. Check with you anytime.
And just like that, we're done. Up to the Second College Football, presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Become a subscriber, like this video, do whatever you can to keep it going. We appreciate you watching. Thanks so much for watching Up to the Second College Football.